It's not just a door, it's a trap.
We found it almost 100 years ago, and we never understood what we awakened.
If it's true, if the pyramids aren't ours, then nothing we believe makes any sense.
What the hell did you open, Doctor?
They call him a god, but he's not a god. He's a parasite from the depths of space.
Fear is the best language, and you will all speak it.
I thought I'd find answers, but I found a nightmare.
They left, but he's still here. In the year 8000 BC, long before recorded history, the sky cracked open over a vast and empty desert. Primitive humans, little more than scattered tribes, roamed the sands with crude tools and fearful eyes. One day, the sky burned with light as a massive triangular spacecraft descended from above. It was nothing these early people could comprehend. Its surface shimmered unnaturally, and its form cast angular shadows that seemed too precise for the natural world. As it settled on the earth with a thunderous hum, the tribespeople screamed and scattered like frightened animals, disappearing into the dunes. All except one. A single man stood frozen in place, staring up at the impossible machine. Something compelled him forward. Curiosity, courage, or perhaps the influence of something greater. Step by step, he approached the ship, his bare feet dragging in the hot sand. From beneath the craft, a blinding beam of light burst forth. It hit the man with a force that lifted him from the ground. His body contorted in pain and awe. Then the light dimmed and he crumpled to the sand, lifeless. No one remained to witness the ship silently retract its ramp, rise into the sky, and vanish into the stars. But it had left something behind, something buried. Millennia passed. In 1928, on the outskirts of Giza, a team of archaeologists worked under the unrelenting Egyptian sun. Among them was a young girl, Catherine Langford, no older than 10, tagging along with her father, Professor Langford. The dig site was like any other, dusty, slow, and filled with broken pottery and fragmented stone. But that changed when a worker's pick struck something solid, deep in the sand. It wasn't rock. It rang like metal. Excavation began in earnest. What they uncovered wasn't a tomb or a ruin. It was a massive, ring-shaped structure buried beneath layers of stone and sand. Unlike anything the team had seen, the object was metallic, cold to the touch, and etched with symbols no one could read. Around it were cover stones, huge slabs engraved with ancient writing and bizarre markings. The men couldn't make sense of it, but Langford knew it was significant. This was older than the pyramids. It might have been older than Egyptian civilization itself. As the men lifted the cover stones, Catherine wandered nearby, her small fingers brushing across a half-buried artifact in the dirt. It was a necklace tangled in old fabric, marked with the symbol of the Egyptian sun god, Ra, a stylized eye encircled by rays. Entranced, she slipped it into her pocket. Later, Catherine and her father stood together, staring at the towering ring they'd uncovered. Neither of them understood what they had found, but Catherine held the Ra necklace tightly in her hand, unaware that this small act of theft would link her life to something far greater than she could ever imagine. And deep beneath the sand, the Stargate waited. Decades later, in the present day, the sky over Los Angeles was gray with smog as the last few attendees filtered into a dimly lit lecture hall. At the podium stood Dr. Daniel Jackson, a historian and linguist whose theories had exiled him from mainstream academia. His topic was ancient Egypt, but not the Egypt taught in textbooks. Jackson believed the pyramids were not built by the dynastic Egyptians at all, that they predated the civilization by thousands of years. He spoke passionately, backed by obscure references, pointing out architectural inconsistencies and weathering patterns that traditional historians refuse to explain. The audience, mostly skeptical professors and researchers, grew restless. When someone asked who he believed had built the pyramids, Jackson replied honestly, he didn't know. The crowd muttered, and within minutes people began to leave. His theory dismissed again. As Jackson packed up his notes, a voice called to him from the back of the room. An elderly woman, dressed in dark clothes and a long coat, introduced herself simply as Catherine Langford. She asked to speak with him privately and led him to her car. Once inside, she offered him a job, one that involved translating something ancient, something that could validate his theories. She said it was the chance of a lifetime. Half a country away, in a quiet suburban home, a former colonel named Jack O'Neill sat alone in his son's bedroom. The room hadn't changed since the accident, since his son had found one of Jack's guns and ended his own life. Jack stared at the walls, hollow-eyed, gun in hand. He was moments away from a decision he couldn't take back when 2 Air Force officers arrived at his door. They told him he was being recalled to active duty. No explanation, just orders. Jack said nothing, but the gun stayed on the dresser as he followed them out. Daniel Jackson was flown to a remote military installation in the Colorado mountains. The facility was deep underground, surrounded by armed guards and endless steel corridors. There, he reunited with Catherine and was introduced to a team of historians, archaeologists, and military personnel. She showed him something he couldn't believe, a fragment of one of the cover stones found in 1928. The outer ring was covered in Egyptian hieroglyphs, but the central portion was written in a language no one had ever seen. Their current translation read, "Door to Heaven," but Jackson immediately noticed errors. One symbol, they claimed, meant heaven, he identified as gate. More importantly, he insisted the phrase should read Stargate. He asked the obvious question: why was the military interested in an ancient artifact? Before anyone could answer, the door opened. Colonel Jack O'Neill entered the room. Cold, quiet, and unreadable, Jack informed Daniel that the project was now under his command. Everything was classified. He would only be told what was necessary to do his job. Daniel spent weeks buried in the symbols. He worked alone in a corner of the facility, surrounded by notebooks, charts, and coffee cups. He couldn't make sense of the inner language. Night after night, the symbols remained a mystery. Then one evening, a bored guard left a newspaper open on a table. On the page was a photo of the Orion constellation. Daniel glanced at it and froze. The shapes were familiar, not as words, but as coordinates. It hit him. The inner ring of symbols weren't letters, they were star constellations. He demanded a meeting. With a chalkboard full of hastily drawn diagrams, Daniel explained that the 7 symbols formed a 3-dimensional address, 6 points to define a destination in space, and a 7th point for the place of origin. The Stargate, he claimed, was a map, a device that could send someone to a fixed point anywhere in the universe. One of the other historians scoffed. If that were true, where was the 7th symbol? Daniel looked confused. What machine? The room went quiet. O'Neill gave a nod. Catherine took Daniel down another corridor, through thick security doors, into a massive chamber. There, towering over the room, was the metallic ring uncovered in Giza decades ago. It stood upright, ringed with strange glyphs, untouched by time. Catherine explained that this was the machine referenced in the inscription, the Stargate. Daniel examined the ring closely, running his fingers along the glyphs. Then he saw it, an additional symbol on the gate itself, one that hadn't appeared on the cover stones. It was the 7th coordinate, the point of origin, the missing piece. With the 7 symbols entered into a control panel, the Stargate powered on for the first time in decades. The inner ring spun rapidly, locking into place with each symbol. With a final metallic slam, the gate stabilized and emitted a burst of energy, then settled into a shimmering vertical pool of light. A wormhole. The military launched a probe through it. Within moments, the device had traveled to the far side of the known universe. The data it returned revealed something astonishing: an alien planet with breathable air, Earth-like gravity, and a second Stargate. However, there was a catch. The symbols on the gate on the other side were different. If a team traveled through, they would have to determine a new set of coordinates to return home. Daniel, emboldened by his discovery, claimed he could do it. Jack wasn't convinced. Nevertheless, preparations began for a reconnaissance mission. Daniel would go with them. Before he left, Catherine pressed something into his hand, the raw necklace she had taken as a child. She said it had always brought her luck. Soon after, a team of soldiers, scientists, and one outcast historian stepped into the gate and vanished into the stars. The Stargate flared to life with a deep hum as Daniel Jackson, Colonel Jack O'Neill, and a squad of armed soldiers stepped through the event horizon. In a blink, their bodies dissolved into light, pulled across the universe through a corridor of stars. When they emerged, they were lying on a stone platform in near total darkness. A stale wind blew across the room. They had arrived inside a vast chamber, silent, ancient, and empty. As their eyes adjusted, they opened the massive doors and stepped into the light. The world outside was a desert, endless and harsh, but the sky was foreign. 3 moons hung above the horizon, illuminating a landscape dominated by a towering pyramid just beyond the structure they had emerged from. The team quickly set up their equipment and secured the area. Jack, as commanding officer, ordered Daniel to find the symbols needed to dial back home. Daniel hesitated. He admitted he had assumed there would be another artifact on this planet, something like the cover stones on Earth, that would show the correct sequence. But there was nothing, no guide. The destination symbols on this gate were entirely different. Jack was furious. The team had just jumped across the universe with no guaranteed way to return. Later, as Jack covertly installed a device near the Stargate, its purpose known only to him, Daniel wandered the desert. He spotted massive footprints in the sand, far too large to belong to any human. Following them, he stumbled upon a strange creature resembling a large beast of burden. Its leathery hide was strapped with a harness. Daniel cautiously approached and placed a hand on its side. Just then, Jack arrived, warning him to back away. Daniel pointed out that the animal was domesticated. It had a harness. Someone was using it. Without warning, the creature bolted, dragging Daniel along with it, tangled in its reins. Jack and two soldiers sprinted after him, chasing the creature across the dunes. The chase ended at the edge of a settlement, a massive tent city spread across the desert. Thousands of humans, tanned by the sun and dressed in primitive robes, were gathered around a mining operation. Workers hammered away at dark stone in deep pits. As the animal came to a stop, the locals spotted Daniel and the soldiers. Everything froze. One of the villagers stepped forward, noticing the necklace hanging from Daniel's neck, the symbol of Ra. He shouted something in a foreign tongue, and within seconds, every person in the area dropped to their knees. They bowed to Daniel. An elder emerged from the crowd, robed in ceremonial garb. He approached slowly and offered the group food and water. Daniel, unsure of how to respond, reached into his pocket and handed the man a chocolate bar. The elder sniffed it, then took a bite, his eyes lighting up. With a smile, he gestured for them to follow. Daniel convinced Jack this was their only lead to finding the return symbols. They were led to a city built from sandstone and metal, teeming with life. The people here revered Ra. They believed Daniel was one of his emissaries. As night fell, the crew shared a meal with the locals. Daniel tried to communicate using Egyptian hieroglyphs, drawing them in the sand. The response was immediate and harsh. His hosts quickly erased the symbols. He realized that writing was forbidden. Later, in a private room, Daniel was bathed and dressed in ceremonial robes. A young woman entered, quiet and beautiful, and began to undress. Daniel panicked, realizing they were offering her to him. He gently stopped her and managed to communicate his name. She replied, Sha'uri. With difficulty, they began to exchange words. As they grew more comfortable, Daniel traced a symbol in the sand, the same one that marked Earth on the Stargate. Sha'uri recognized it. She pointed excitedly, indicating she had seen it before. Daniel asked her to take him to it. Elsewhere in the desert sky, a pyramid-shaped spacecraft descended silently, eclipsing the stars. It hovered over the structure the team had arrived in and locked into place. The remaining crew, stationed there, barely had time to react before they were attacked. Armored warriors emerged, tall and terrifying, with jackal-headed helmets and advanced weaponry. They moved with deadly precision, capturing the soldiers one by one. Meanwhile, Sha'uri led Daniel deep into the desert, into a hidden cave. Its walls were covered in ancient Egyptian writing, fluent, articulate, and preserved across generations. Daniel read them aloud. Sha'uri watched, amazed, realizing he understood her language. She helped him pronounce the words correctly, teaching him as he read. The cave held the forgotten story of their world. It told of a powerful being from across the stars who came to Earth in a dying body. He found a young boy and took over his form, using advanced technology to sustain himself. This being became Ra. With his stolen power, he enslaved early humans, transporting them across space using the Stargate. Here, on this planet, they mined the precious mineral that powered all his devices. But rebellion had begun on Earth. The people rose against him, and to prevent them from following, Ra buried the Stargate. To ensure obedience on this planet, he banned reading and writing, keeping the people ignorant of their past. Daniel and Sha'uri discovered a stone tablet etched with 6 of the 7 Stargate symbols. It was almost what they needed, but the 7th symbol, the return point, had eroded away with time. Without it, they were still stranded. As they returned to the pyramid, a brutal ambush awaited. Jack and Daniel were taken by Ra's guards, armored giants with inhuman strength. The device Jack had planted near the gate was missing. A transport platform descended from above, and Ra revealed himself. Surrounded by children and guards, he appeared young, unaging. His mask came off to reveal a beautiful yet emotionless face. Daniel and Jack were brought before him. Ra held up Jack's device, a nuclear bomb. He intended to use it, enhanced with alien technology, to destroy Earth and erase any trace of rebellion. He would send it back through the gate. When Jack tried to fight back, Daniel was caught in the crossfire. He was shot and left for dead. As the world prepared for execution, something else stirred. A group of young boys from the village had discovered the crew's weapons and had seen the horrors brought upon their people for helping these strangers. Enraged, they readied themselves. Daniel awoke inside a glowing sarcophagus, an alien healing chamber. His wounds were gone. Ra stood beside him, smug, explaining that this was why he chose the human form, easily sustained, easily repaired. He revealed his plan to make Daniel publicly execute his crew, forcing obedience from the people once more. But resistance was already forming. Sha'uri had told the boys about Earth, about freedom, and about how the gods they feared were not gods at all. At the execution, just as Daniel was handed a weapon and ordered to kill, the boys in the crowd raised their stolen guns and fired into the air. The crowd erupted. Daniel turned and fired, not at Jack, but at Ra's guards. Chaos broke loose. The soldiers fought their way free. In the aftermath, the rebels and crew regrouped in a cave. There, Daniel confronted Jack. He demanded to know what the bomb was really for. Jack admitted the truth. His orders were to investigate the alien world, and if it posed a threat, stay behind and destroy the Stargate. That was still his plan. But hope hadn't run out yet. That night, Daniel shared a quiet moment with Sha'uri. She confessed that she'd been ashamed when he first refused her. He kissed her gently and showed her it wasn't rejection. It was choice. Moments later, he noticed something small. A boy had drawn a picture of the day's chaos in the sand. Above the pyramid in the sketch were 3 moons. That was it, the final symbol. The symbol that made this place different from Earth. They had the full address. They could go home. The desert night was fractured by gunfire and rebellion. Ra's execution had turned into a revolt, ignited by children who no longer believed in gods. The illusion of power, held together by fear and ritual, had been shattered by a single act of defiance. Daniel, still holding the weapon Ra had given him to kill his friends, had turned it on the tyrant's enforcers. The soldiers, once isolated and outnumbered, were now surrounded by allies, miners, elders, boys with borrowed guns. The people had chosen to stand, but freedom came at a cost. The crew fled into the mines, taking refuge among the rebels. There, in the flickering light of burning torches, Daniel finally confronted Jack. The soldiers and villagers stood in silence as Daniel demanded the truth about the device Jack had brought, about his mission. Jack didn't deny it. His voice was low, steady. He'd been ordered to detonate the nuclear bomb if the world on the other side of the Stargate posed a threat. No backup, no return, just him and the bomb. He had accepted it. After losing his son, dying alone on an alien world hadn't seemed like a punishment. It had felt like justice. But now everything had changed. They were no longer facing monsters, but people. Not mindless enemies, but men, women, children, slaves fighting to remember who they were before Ra. Jack hadn't expected that. None of them had. Daniel remained silent for a moment, then turned away. He had found what he was looking for, and it wasn't buried in stone or written in some lost language. It was standing beside him, asking for a future. Later that night, he found Shauri. She stood by a small fire, watching the stars. He told her the people didn't need gods. They needed to remember their power, their voice. She smiled, quiet and proud. Then she kissed him. This time there was no hesitation. In the morning, hope became strategy. Daniel and the soldiers disguised themselves as mine workers and snuck into Ra's pyramid. The plan was to reach the gate, input the symbols, and return to Earth. But they would not leave this world in chains. The rebels attacked with whatever weapons they had: stone, metal, stolen rifles. The uprising was no longer a whisper in the shadows. It was a roar. Inside the pyramid, the crew found Ra's guards waiting. A firefight erupted in the narrow corridors. Shauri fought alongside them, her aim steady, her fear gone. But in the chaos, she was struck in the chest by one of Ra's henchmen. Daniel dropped to his knees beside her, screaming. He shot the attacker and held her, blood soaking through her robes. Jack called out to him, but Daniel didn't hear. There was only one thought in his mind: the sarcophagus. He dragged Shauri onto a transport platform. As the mechanism lifted them to Ra's chamber, Jack battled below. He disarmed one of Ra's elite guards and pushed his head into the transport ring as it activated. The sound was sharp, final. The headless body collapsed. Upstairs, Daniel laid Shauri in the healing chamber. Light engulfed her, and he waited, breath held, eyes locked on her still form. When the lid opened, she gasped for air. She was alive, but Ra was waiting. The alien tyrant descended like a god of vengeance, catching Daniel by surprise. He hurled him across the room and began torturing him, waves of searing light pulsing from his hand. Daniel writhed in agony as Shauri screamed. Down below, Jack reached the Stargate. The bomb sat at its base, already ticking. He tried to disarm it, but Ra had disabled the failsafe. 7 minutes to detonation. No way to stop it. Then Jack saw the guard's severed hand still clenching the teleportation remote. An idea formed. He shouted Daniel's name through the comms. Up above, Daniel heard Jack's voice. Crawling toward the device, bloodied but alive, he activated the platform and transported himself and Shauri back to the gate. Behind them, Ra turned and fled, retreating into his ship. Jack and Daniel locked eyes. They didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Daniel pointed the remote skyward and pressed the button. High above, Ra's pyramid ship powered its engines, preparing to ascend. Just as it began to lift, the bomb appeared inside, teleported directly into the heart of the vessel. A second later, the sky exploded. A light brighter than the sun lit the heavens, and Ra, the last god of a forgotten empire, was gone. Silence followed. Then from the hills, the people emerged. Villagers and miners, elders and children, all looking to the sky. When they saw the fire fade, they began to cheer. A new sound rose in the desert, not chants of worship, but celebration. Jack stood at the base of the Stargate, bloodied, tired, but alive. Daniel stood beside Shauri, his hand wrapped around hers. The Stargate hummed to life once again, its surface rippling with blue light. The return address was locked in. The soldiers prepared to leave. Daniel didn't move. Jack turned to him. "You coming?" Daniel looked at Shauri, then back at Jack. "I'm staying." Jack didn't argue. He nodded once, a quiet respect passing between them. For the first time in years, Jack had something to go home for. He stepped into the gate, disappearing in a flash of light. Daniel watched the event horizon fade and the ring go still. Around him, the people cheered, not because a god had come, but because a man had stayed. The stars above shone brighter than he had ever seen. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning.